Hey, we want to welcome you to this week's ministry show, and we've got a bunch to cover today. But before we do, it'd be appropriate to review real quick the last couple of shows. We started off with the philosophy of ministry because that's where everything flows from. We all have a philosophy that we live by, and the question of that show is really, is your philosophy of ministry intentional and accurate? Then we introduced the 5 habits of thriving ministry: recruit, train, place, support, and monitor. And we're going to be getting into recruiting today, but the show right after that, before we talked about recruiting, we wanted to debunk some volunteer myths that are out there, because if we buy into myths and legends and things that are really not true, it makes all the whole recruiting process tougher. It makes building a ministry much more difficult. And we wanted to really dig down and get to the bedrock, kind of build your house on the rock instead of build your house on the sand. It's easier to build it on the sand, but it doesn't last as long. And of course, we all know in ministry that the storm's going to come. If you're having a peaceful time right now, that's great. I'm happy for you. But there's a storm of brewing. So we want to make sure we get right down to that bedrock.
Yeah, we've all had myths that we've brought into ministry, but it's more in the trenches that we find out that something can be very different than we thought it was. And that can produce a strong emotion within us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so if you've sort of been blindsided in ministry or kind of had something come out of the blue, man, you know what we're talking about. And it's when our philosophy of ministry is strong and solid that we make it through that to get to the next level, the next step, and so on.
Yeah, and sometimes we're thrown into ministry situations that can be dysfunctional at best. Or we're thrown into a situation where we don't understand what the next step is. I fall into that category. My first ministry position, thrown into that. And it's a challenge.
Yeah, it sure is, Pam. The best way that I can deal with that is basically, hey, we live in a Genesis 3 world. My expectations can sometimes forget that we're in a fallen world. But when I can align that, it just makes it for maybe not smoother sailing, but there's not as many ups and downs. And I understand that we don't live in the Garden of Eden. So it just makes it easier to continue to move forward. So what are we going to be talking about today, Pam?
Well, the essence of this show is that all ministry starts with recruiting, which is basically just inviting people in. It's activities that happen. If you're not able to invite people in, then you might want to, not now, but maybe in the future, think about replacing yourself with someone who can do that.
Well, we're going to teach you how to do that.
That's right.
Don't leave now.
Yeah, don't go leaving now. And also that includes hiring people. Hiring and recruiting go hand in hand.
Let's just talk for a minute about the 2 real common modalities for recruiting that we deploy in ministry today. And you can see on your screen, one of them I like to call fill a slot. We've got a lot of different slots that need to be filled in ministry. And it really doesn't matter what ministry it is: children, hospitality, worship, the whole thing. A lot of times we are working diligently and hard to just fill the number of slots because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to pull off our weekend services, weddings, funerals, youth events, and so on and so forth. And sometimes we just need willing people that can do the task at hand. Then the other one is find a person. When we fill a slot, the job gets done. But when we find a person, the mission gets done. And finding a person means there's certain attributes or qualities that are necessary that we already know about for somebody to fill that role. Like, for example, a worship leader. If I could be, I'd want to be the worship leader at a church. Problem is, Pam, God made me tone deaf.
Me too.
Are you?
A little bit.
Okay, well, I'm a lot. There's no way that I can fill that because I don't have the raw material that's necessary. When we're trying to find that person, we need to just identify the type of person and the qualities that they have so that they can be successful in that particular ministry. Both of those things are important. And I think you're going to talk about that.
Yep. So which is more important, filling a slot or finding a person? And they're both valuable. They're both needed in different ways. Some people will spend way too much time recruiting for roles that are task-based. For instance, if you have one-time outreach and you just want to get people into those positions to serve, great. Don't spend too much time in there. Put them into that task. And Chris, what I've found is when you do have things like outreach ministries or opportunities to serve that one time, maybe in a shelter, whatever that is, it creates an excitement in people to want to serve more. And you can also see the way people are serving and be able to determine their leadership gifts and where they would be a good place in serving other places in the church. Haven't you found that?
I've found that to be true. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the higher the threshold that you have, the less people as far as finding people. There's a deeper impact, part of disciple making that goes along with that, and it's a good investment. It's a large return as you invest in people. You're going to have a larger return investment there, and it also brings stability like you talked about earlier with the rock and the sand. It brings stability into your ministry when you are finding the right people, you're developing those leaders, and you're building your teams.
Yeah, one of the things I like best about the type of recruiting where we're looking for a large amount of people, just filling a slot with them, then I can observe people and see, gosh, do they really like this? Are they filling this because of a duty thing? Mm-hmm. And we find some of our best leaders from actually recruiting them to just fill a slot to start with. That is a valuable piece of it.
You can observe attitude there.
Absolutely.
I have recruited some of my best leaders, watching them in just a one-day event that we had. The attitude trumped ability. And then I put them in, they were amazing.
So don't discount filling a slot type recruiting. And I want to go a little bit deeper on selecting a person. And what we're looking for there is usually a specific skill set or a specific set of talents or gifts that are given to somebody from the Holy Spirit. I'm just going to generally call them attributes. And so when I'm selecting a person, I need to predetermine these specific attributes that are most likely to lead to success. So let me use maybe a small group leader role. Maybe you call them life groups or community groups. There's certain attributes there that are pretty common for a life group leader, a small group leader, to be successful. Number one, they're maybe a shepherd. So they care for and about people. Or they're a facilitator or leader, or maybe some combination of those three. I've recruited some people early on in my ministry to small groups that had gifts of mercy and hospitality. And everybody loved being there, but they never talked about the scripture. They didn't get through an agenda. They talked about I'm from San Diego or was there for 20 years, and they talked about the Padres or the Chargers. Point being, you have to predetermine what would be the success attributes that you're looking for. Well, once you do that, all of a sudden you begin to see those people in your ministry. And it eliminates what I like to call the American Idol syndrome. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Somebody thinks that they're, because they've grown up and they've got a very encouraging family, even though they might be skilled or gifted in a certain area, have really tried to help make that happen. You've probably seen it on American Idol, where somebody's not that great of a singer. They've got multimillionaire people that have been in the recording industry for 15, 20, 30 years. Tell them they're not that great. And they get mad at the judges because those judges do. Anyway, when you have that predetermined attribute, you eliminate that. The other thing that happens when we're selecting a person is this. You have a part of your brain that is called the reticular activating system. Now, I'm not a biologist or doctor or anything like that, but it is the part of the brain that filters out all things that are not important. And man, especially with our workaday world today and tweets and texts and so many bombardments from messages and things like that, when we get specific and look for specific attributes, you begin to notice them. The easiest way I can explain it is if you've ever bought a car that's new to you, could be a used car, but a different car, then what happens? You start noticing everybody's driving that car.
It's so true.
That's because it became important to you.
Yeah.
And then so your brain lets that in, so you begin noticing it. That is a great way to recruit people to, as Pam, I think you mentioned, the higher leadership roles or specific skill sets. Like you don't want me trying to run the database of the church. It'll get all messed up because I'm not as detail-oriented as other people. When we're talking about selecting a person and having this specific skill set, it is very important that once you determine the success criteria that somebody needs to meet, don't make exception to it. Because when you do, you already have a team of people involved, and whoever we let on that team indicates to our current team how valuable they are. And when we make exceptions to those kinds of rules, it's almost like Notre Dame allowing me, back in the day when I played football, to be their starting tight end. That's not going to happen. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't coordinated enough. I often tell the story about when I went to Eric Parsegian's office, and
love this story.
I drove there right out of high school because I didn't get the recruitment letter from Notre Dame, which I wanted. I graduated from Catholic high school, found his office and came into the office and said, hey, I'm your new starting tight end.
You did not.
Yeah, about that time, everybody knows and understands that's a baloney story. But we need to be careful that we don't act that way in ministry, because here's what I can tell you. Your ministry is more important than Notre Dame football by a long shot, because what we do is eternal. We don't want to make exceptions to the criteria, and we don't want to have people that are not qualified in an assignment where they would get annihilated. Now, I know some of you are thinking about the Rudy movie. Everybody loves the Rudy story. I want you to understand, Rudy didn't play for Notre Dame. I think he got in a play or two or something at the very end.
Oh, that's true.
He was inspirational for sure, but he wasn't on the field, okay? The point being, we have to be very careful as we're building ministry teams, as we're selecting the right kind of people, because number one, we want them to be successful. If we predetermine what the success criteria is, and we put somebody that doesn't have that in play, then it's bad for them. Number two, it's bad for the team. Number three, you're going to start leaking out energy like a battery that's short-circuited.
Right. Yeah, and we want that counterbalance too. We don't want the expectations and that bar to be raised so high that others can't find a point of entry to serve. Maybe take some time and think about your philosophy of ministry, and have you set that bar too high to allow people to serve initially? When that person comes to mind that you're thinking about, you need to have a conversation with them. So I've had people come to mind as I've done ministry and think, man, why are they on my mind? Why are they on my heart? So I start to observe them, connect with them, and then I just ask them a simple question. Are you interested in, and whatever that is? And usually because I've gotten to know them a little bit, or I see their gift set, I know where they're going to serve best. At least I think I do, until they tell me no. But for the most part, you can pretty much tell people's gifts. They find a place for them. And then I verify their interests. Is it a good fit? I talk to them about that, the different ministry assignments we have. And I also listen to certain cues that they say. And we talked about this earlier in a few shows back about Kim. I listened. And when she got excited about that ministry that she did in San Diego, boy, I was going to make a place for her to serve. And then if you have all the time and all the money, what would you do? That's a great question to ask people, because you hear their passion.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite recruiting question ever. Mm-hmm. Hey, Bill, if you had some extra time and some extra money, you didn't have to count for anything, man, what would I find you doing?
Right.
Oh, it reveals so much about who we are. And then another hot tip for you is what I call the jigsaw puzzle. And that is basically, if you've ever done a jigsaw puzzle or seen somebody do a jigsaw puzzle, where do you start? Well, you find those four corners and then you build the edges. Right. That's how everybody I know starts. And you don't need to know everything about somebody, but if you can identify their four corners, man, you are way ahead of the game. These hot tips are meant to just simplify things for you. I got a friend of mine, his name's Kirk, and here's what I know about Kirk. Number one, he's totally family oriented. That's one of his corners. The second one is this: how he relates with others and God is to do something with them. So he is a worker and a helper. So he needs to be physically engaged in order to feel great. Well, that's another corner. A third corner for Kirk is he's absolutely generous. He's got a huge heart and he wants to make a contribution. So, well, what do I look for? Well, I look for things that he can do that require physical labor, where he's making a contribution and it makes a difference long term. That's just some hot tips on that side when you're trying to recruit a person rather than recruit a bunch of people and fill a slot. And then obviously what we got to do, no matter what recruiting modality that we're utilizing is, we've got to check results. That's part of leadership that sometimes we are hesitant to do as pastors and church leaders, because we have to evaluate somebody.
Right.
Are they doing the job? Can they do the job? If they're not, do they need more training, or are they a misplacement and it's our job to help them find a place where they can be productive? The then what is really, you got to observe and you got to watch and you got to see what's happening and then adjust where and when necessary.
You also need to see if that's a good fit for them in that role as well. And if you don't have the ability to observe right away, have those mentors in place. I've shared that with you before. I've had mentors that connect with those new volunteers, and they may work with them for a month or two, and they'll come back to me and say, here's some things I observed in them I think they would be a great fit in this area. And that helps because, you're getting that feedback from others as well. Are they faithful? Do they show up? Are they showing up on time? That's a big issue, especially when you need them there at a specific time. And then I always check back with them personally. After they've served their first week, I want to touch base, make sure it was all that they thought it was going to be. Is it a good fit? I remember this one time I had someone in an early education class and she said, "Oh, I heard the babies and it's just my heart leapt." And I said, "Well, do you want to switch? Do you want to go into the nursery?" And she did, and that was a perfect fit for her. And it was a blessing for all of us.
All right, let me end this way. You'll see there's an action item there. The most valuable recruiting tactic that I can mention, we save till the last, and that is to listen.
Yeah.
If listen was a stock, LSTN, on the New York Stock Exchange, I would have all my money in it because our noisy world, everybody wants to be heard. Nobody wants to listen. So we actually have a resource for you there that is quick to listen, slow to speak. It's a book. And so here's an exercise that you can do that will help you hone your listening skills. Talk to 3 of the most significant people in your life and ask this question. What was the best part of your day? And then what do? Be quiet. Don't say another word and listen. I use this with my teenagers. It works.
It does.
Not how was your day? That's a different question than what was the best part of your day. As you and I develop this criteria and learn to listen to crowds of people for fill in a slot or individual people, we will get expert at recruiting them. We hope that this lesson has been helpful to you, and we've got more to talk about recruiting in future shows.
You don't want to miss next week because we're going to talk about buying back some of your time. Everybody needs that.
Hey, we vetted some sponsors. These folks here, we actually work with them here at Church Community Builder. So if you have a need in one of these areas, check out our sponsors. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.